The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Suckling on the teat of tech.
With Paul Brislen.
Talking high-tech, Paul Brislen, back for 2011, our first chat for the year. G'day there, Paul.
Good morning, how are you?
Good. Of course, counting down the days until you start the new job of the head of 2ANZ.
2ANZ, the Telecommunication Users Association of New Zealand.
You're going to have a busy year.
I think so. There's going to be quite a bit to get on with, isn't there?
Yeah. Now, talking about telecommunications users, most of us, 99.9% of us are probably telecommunications users.
I would hope so.
Internet users. And when you're using all these tools, especially I'm thinking web tools, you don't really think about it. They just kind of work.
It just all comes together, doesn't it?
Yeah, and but there's a whole lot of people buzzing around behind the scenes, making sure that stuff works, and it works in the best and most efficient way.
That's right.
YouTube, of course, being one of these tools.
Exactly. And one of the things that goes into all of this behind-the-scenes stuff are the standards. Which standard shall we adopt?
Yeah.
Should we use this particular model for that kind of thing, or that particular model for this kind of thing?
And companies have different ideas about what is standard.
They do. They absolutely do. And there's the standards wars of old are what led to things like the browser wars, Internet Explorer versus Netscape back in the day.
Yeah.
Where Netscape tread the fine path of let's keep everything based on the open standards, and Microsoft came along, gave away their product for free, stole the market, and then started changing the standard to a Microsoft standard. That's all been reversed now, of course, thankfully, thanks to Firefox and the likes of Ben Goodyear and the folk who built a free web browser to defeat the other free web browser. And I think we've all benefited from that.
And of course, Google, the owners of YouTube, have long been the champions of so-called open source.
They have.
What are called codecs to actually make stuff like video work.
And that's what we're talking about here is the current stoush over Google deciding that it will no longer support a codec, which is the piece of software that decodes and re-encodes video to make video run nice and smoothly on your computer. They will no longer support what has become one of the default standards, H.264.
Right.
Dum.
Well, I don't know why they couldn't have given it a snappier sort of name.
Because they're all engineers, that's why. This is where we got hypertext from, hypertext markup language. So if you get them to think in words, it doesn't work at all. So we just leave them with the numbers, that's fine. So Google, what they've done is they've announced that they will no longer support H.264 in the Google Chrome web browser, which has led to all kinds of consternation around the web because H.264 is the standard at the moment for, as I say, video encrypting and decrypting.
Now, is it an open standard, or does a company own H.264?
No, there are a whole bunch of patents behind it, which is part of Google's rationale for saying, no, we're no longer going to be doing this. It's encumbered until at least, I think, 2036, something like that.
So someone's actually making money off it somewhere?
Well, not a lot of money. Google does pay a licensing fee for it, but it's trivial for Google. It's something like $6 or $7 million US a year.
Right.
Basically, it's capped, and it's not a huge revenue drain for them. So it's not the money that's at stake here. And there's been a lot of discussion about, what does it mean? Is this Google versus Apple? Is this all about the future of Apple's dislike of Flash, which is what Google uses for YouTube videos in large part.
Although Google has a dislike for Flash as well.
Well, they do really, don't they? And so this sort of the problem is that Google's come out with this statement and then not explain themselves terribly well. But there is a very good link, a very good blog, I should say, on the Guardian website, which tries to go to some lengths to get some answers and to explain what's going on. And basically it stems from the fact that Google is really run as a bottom-up organization rather than as a top-down organization.
What do you mean by that?
Well, that is the engineers who are working on a project get to make these kinds of decisions. So the engineers working on Chrome have decided that H.264 doesn't suit their purposes, and that they will be promoting this other standard, which Google is very keen on, which is WebM. And the video component there is VP8, which is a whole different set of kettle of fish altogether. Because they've decided this, it's all about Chrome. It's filtered up and become, by the time it gets released into the public space, Google as a whole has decided that H.264 is no longer to be used, when in fact it's just a bunch of the engineering guys at Chrome. It doesn't apply to the other Google properties like YouTube or Android, the mobile operating system.
Yeah.
And so really you've got this kind of disconnect. It's not a decision, a strategic decision made by Google that that's the end of that. This is something that a bunch of engineers have decided, well, no, for our purposes, it'll be much better not to use H.264.
So for the end user who either wants to watch YouTube or upload video to YouTube, nothing has really changed.
It won't matter a jot.
Okay.
No. So they've got tens of thousands of pages of web angst devoted to what this all means.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, when you
Doesn't
click
mean
on a
anything.
video, it's still going to work.
But I tell you what, one thing I've noticed in my experience, YouTube has an experimental beta side of YouTube where
That's right.
rather than watching your video in Flash, you can watch it in what is called HTML5.
That's right.
Which is processed inside browsers that support HTML5, like Chrome, I think Safari as well.
Yeah, Firefox 4 will support HTML5, I believe.
Yeah.
Things like that.
What I've noticed on my small netbook is that it runs a lot faster. Flash seems to bog everything down. I think people have noticed this when they go to a website that has Flash ads. Everything starts going very slow.
It all grinds to a halt, doesn't it? And that's Apple's big concern with Flash, is that it is a memory hog and it's unpleasant. It's not elegant. It doesn't do the things it's supposed to do, and it gets in the way of other things doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So, I can understand, this is what you get when you've got engineers leading things, that in effect they've decided, well, no, it's not for us, we're going to use something else. But it's created all these waves of angst amongst video uploaders, amongst software developers who are saying, well, hang on, if you're not going to follow this particular standard, what else are you going to ditch when it suits you? And generally speaking, it's all been quite the storm. It's been quite entertaining to watch.
Yeah, well, I just hope at the end of the day that everything just still keeps on working.
So long as you keep clicking, it'll be fine.
Yeah, one of the other big stories, apart from CES and the gadgets that were released at CES, was the news that Steve Jobs is stepping down to go back on some kind of sick leave, though he still will be doing something there in the background. Yeah,
it sounds like he's given over direct day-to-day running of Apple to Tim Cook, who's the chief operating officer. And he will sort of lurk in the background, pulling strings from presumably the chairman's role, more or less, if Apple was a traditional company. But it does sound like he's gone back to it's called medical leave, so everybody's presuming it's tied in with this rare form of pancreatic cancer, which first hit him in 2004, I think. So he's stepping back. Last time he did this, the share price took a huge hit because I think everybody has come to the conclusion that Apple is Steve Jobs, and when he's not around, the company falls mightily on its own sword. And when he is there, it produces game-changing products like the iPhone and the iPad. So this time the shares haven't budged terribly much, mostly because at the same time this was announced, Apple released a whole stack of information in its quarterly report, which says its revenues have increased 71%, mostly off the back of the iPad.
Yeah, extraordinary.
Now this is astonishing amount. You think about the trying economic times of which we're a part at the moment.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be a recession going on. Apple's Mac business, its traditional Mac computing business, has had its best year ever in 27 years, and it was beaten by the iPad market. I mean, 14.8 million iPads shipped last year. That's not necessarily sold. Apple plays silly buggers with the numbers. That's shipped to the retail channel. They'll get sold eventually, of course. But they sold half of those, 7 million iPads in the last quarter alone, the Christmas quarter.
Pretty amazing.
So this is, it's phenomenal. It is. There's talk at IDC, the research company, that the sales of the iPad are impacting on sales of computers. People aren't buying PCs anymore. They're buying iPads.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I'm sitting here at home with two primary school kids who use a computer more and more every day, and I'm thinking, well, gee, we really do need a second computer, which sounds very middle class. But I don't think I'll buy a computer. It'll probably be an iPad. But then, of course, I won't get near it. So maybe we'll need two iPads. it's a slippery slope, isn't it? But I've got to say, they have astonished the market with, the iPad business being worth $10 billion in revenue within 9-10 months. I mean, we haven't even had a full year of it in the market yet.
No.
So quite remarkable.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Anytime.
Paul Brislen on Twitter as well, twitter.com/Paul